you, Jack. It's good to be here, and go Buckeyes. I know I'm in the wrong part of the country. I know we don't play anybody, I know. Anyway, yeah, it's good to be here and be part of the lecture series and be numbered amongst these great pro-life warriors. And religion this evening. Created equal. The name speaks for itself. The fact that we are created in the image of God, number one, and that speaks of our equality as well. From Genesis to our founding fathers to social reformers like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who reiterated this concept that we're all created equal and endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among those are the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This theme has gone throughout human history. Unfortunately, the aspect of being created equal no longer, unfortunately, applies to the preborn. And that's why our name, I think, really means a lot and plays well in a culture that doesn't understand equality. So we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. We're going to share a little bit about what we're doing on college campuses and high school campuses across America. But before we do, what I'd like to do is try to lay out a biblical foundation for why we do what we do. And I know that I'm speaking to the choir somewhat today, and understanding that everyone here is here for a reason because they believe that God has made us in His image and we deserve the right to life. But there is confusion in the church, if you didn't notice, as to what our role or what our responsibility should be in defending the preborn. And therefore, it's important that we actually go back to the Scriptures occasionally and draw from it lessons that we can apply to contemporary America and to share with our friends and our colleagues. So what I'd like to do is take a moment and share a lesson from the book of Luke, in which we call it's historically been called the Good Samaritan parable. Okay? Luke chapter 10, verse 25. Let me read. And a lawyer stood up and put Jesus to the test, saying, "Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?" And he said to him, "What's written in the law? How does it read to you?" And he answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And he said to him, "You've answered correctly. Do this, and you will live." But wishing to justify himself, he said to Jesus, "Who is my neighbor?" So here you have this picture that Jesus is showing us, where you have a lawyer, okay, not a lawyer like we think of lawyers today. This was a scholar of the Old Testament who understood the law and the prophets. And he asked the question, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? Now, I don't know about you. I'm not sure how I'd answer that question, but it's interesting how Jesus answered that question, isn't it? What did he say? Keep the law. He said, keep the law. And then he summarized the law in 2 commandments. And he said, love God and love your neighbor. The entire Old Testament, the law and the prophets, he basically said, can be summarized in 2 commandments. The greatest commandment, love God and love your neighbor. That's it. That's what it takes. Now, this lawyer, wishing to justify himself, said, well, who's my neighbor? Wanting to get off the hook, right? That's what lawyers do, I guess. Try to get them off the hook and everybody else. So Jesus then begins this story about 4 individuals. And it says this. Jesus replied and said, a certain man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, and they stripped him, and they beat him, and they went away, leaving him half dead. And by chance a priest was going down on that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Likewise, a Levite, when he came upon the place and saw him, he passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, who was on a journey, came upon him, and when he saw him, he felt compassion upon him. And he came to him, and he bandaged up his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them. And he put him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And on the next day, he gave out 2 denarii to him, and gave them to the innkeeper, and said to him, "Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I return, I will repay you." Which of these 3 do you think proved to be the neighbor to the man who fell among robbers? And he said, "The one that showed mercy upon him." And Jesus said, "Go and do the same." Go and do the same. So here you have this story. Jesus is answering the question, who is my neighbor? Now it's interesting because that's the very question that people are asking about the preborn child. Are they really our neighbors? In this parable, there's 4 characters. You have the certain man. The certain man, he's anonymous. He doesn't have a name. He's a non-person. Sound familiar? When we perpetrate injustice on other people, we typically first dehumanize them. We strip them of their personhood. They're non-persons. That's happened all throughout history. And it's interesting that this person didn't have a name. He was the certain man. And then the second character, or second and the third character, were the priest and the Levite. And the priest and the Levite, they were religious people, right? They saw the beating victim as well. They might have had more important things to do, like go to a prayer meeting or preach a sermon or go to a Bible study. They were busy people, you know. They didn't have time to stop by. They didn't have time to minister to the beating victim. Now, they should have known. I'm certain that, the Old Testament is clear about the command to take care of the poor and the oppressed and the downtrodden and to feed the hungry and give drink to the thirsty. They understood that, but they didn't change the way they lived that day to help out this beating victim. And then you have the fourth person, the Samaritan. And the Samaritan, of course, they're outcasts in this culture. They don't hang around anybody. They can't really associate with anyone else. But the Samaritan did something that the priest and Levite didn't do. The Samaritan stopped what he was doing that day. And it changed his life forever. Let's read. In verse 33, it says that the Samaritan, when he saw him, he felt compassion on the beating victim. That was the first thing that happened. An emotional response to what he saw. We often hear in the abortion debate that this is an emotional issue, right? And I say, well, yeah, it should be. If you can look upon a dismembered child and not feel something inside, then something's wrong with you. You've lost the ability to have a functioning conscience. I wonder, is your heart still beating if you can do that? Well, the Samaritan felt compassion upon that beating victim. Emotionally, something happened inside. That's a good thing. That's what's lacking in America, isn't it? Do we really care about anyone but ourselves nowadays? So, the Samaritan felt compassion. But that wasn't it. The feeling wasn't the end of it. Emotions are good only if they help you to change behavior, right? And what did he do? It says he came to him. He came to the beating victim. Okay? So, here he is, the priest and the Levite and the Samaritan certainly they had a busy day probably, they had things to do. They were on their way. Right? Priest and the Levite saw him, but continued on their way. The Samaritan, however, was on his way, but he stopped what he was doing. And he came to him, he approached him. And see, that probably was a risky thing to do, wouldn't it be? Who knows what would happen? But he came to him, he approached him, and then what did he do? He bandaged him up and he took care of him. So he approached him and he ministered to him. And that's what we do in the pro-life movement. The ultimate mercy ministry is what we're involved in. If you think about it, how are we merciful to the preborn? Well, we're merciful because we speak out for them. And we're merciful to the women and the men, the parents that might be considering abortion or who have had abortions by ministering to them as well. So he bandaged him up and he took care of him. And then, what did he do? He put him on his own beast. He didn't say, okay, that's enough, I'm done. He put him on his own beast. That means that he bore the burdens of the beating victim upon himself. He took it upon himself that day to say, it's not just his problem. It's not just everybody else's problem. It's my problem. It's my problem. And from now until forever, I am going to carry this burden with me. Now we know that Jesus says, cast your burdens upon me. He carries our burdens, doesn't he? But the scripture also says that we should bear each other's burdens and thus fulfill the law of Christ, which is love. So this Samaritan understood that it wasn't enough to just minister to him, but he had to actually take it upon himself, the plight of the beating victim. He put it on his own beast. And then what did he do? He wasn't done. He said to the innkeeper, when I return, I shall repay you. He wasn't done just that day. Something happened that changed this man's life. This Samaritan was changed forever because of what he saw that day. And it wasn't just one day, it was forever. His entire life had been altered. And he said, when I return, I will repay you. So there was return. There was a continued ministry, an ongoing effort to continue to help this person. And that's what we need in the pro-life movement. It's just not a one-time thing. It's not one time a year when we go to Washington, D.C. and do the high five at the March for Life. As good as that is, it's much more than that. It's a daily commitment. Our lives are going to be different because babies are dying in America. It has to be that way. And there's also a financial component here as well. He said, what? I will repay you. We should be supporting pro-life ministry. We should support it to the point that it hurts a little bit. Jack Ames, Defend Life, deserves your support. And many other ministries like it. The CPCs, the Crisis Pregnancy Centers, in your own area deserve your support. Hugely underfunded ministries. Doing things on a shoestring. There is a component of our commitment that requires a financial support. So, to summarize the Good Samaritan in the contemporary application, let me just say this. First of all, injustice has to be seen to be understood. The priest and the Levite and the Samaritan all saw the beating victim. It was important that they did because now they are accountable. They were accountable. Now, the Samaritan was the only one that had the right response. But injustice must be seen to be understood. Seeing is believing. That's number one. Number two, feeling compassion is different than showing compassion. See, what passes for pro-life in America and in many of our churches, if we're attitudinally against abortion. That passes. It's like, well, I'm against abortion, and that's usually the end of the story. Okay, well, that's cold comfort to the babies that are dying today. Feeling compassion is different than showing compassion. Being attitudinally pro-life is not enough. We have to be behaviorally pro-life. See, there are lots of churches that are pro-life, lots of Christians that are pro-life, but if you ask them what they're doing, many of them aren't doing much at all. Well, that isn't going to do a whole lot of good, is it? We have to be actively involved, behaviorally pro-life, showing compassion. And sometimes in order to get to somebody's head and change the way they think, you've got to go through their hearts. And that's what we try to do. These images that we use on college campuses, both prenatal and abortion images and all across America, are there for that purpose. To startle people enough to get them to think. To bother them enough to prick their conscience that they might stop for a moment and think differently. To reconsider the whole proposition of what's going on in this country. So, what I'd like to do now is give you an opportunity to get to know this contemporary human victim, and that is the preborn child. And the first video I'm going to show you is prenatal development video using a technology called embryoscopy. It's an endoscope, a camera that goes inside the womb and actually videos the preborn in development. And it's created by the Endowment for Human Development. EHD.org if you're interested. The entire documentary film is about 40 minutes long. It's on their website. And it's private labeled by National Geographic Society. These are the type of images that are changing the pro-life debate all across America. The horse is out of the barn, so to speak, when it comes to pictures like this. Ultrasound imagery as well has been proven that almost 8 out of 10 women that view an ultrasound prior to possibly considering abortion, what? They choose life. Just because they understand now that the baby's a baby. These images are changing the debate. So what I'd like to do, go ahead Craig if you wouldn't mind, is go ahead and cue this video up. It's a little bit technical, but focus in on the actual baby himself.
By 6 weeks, the cerebral hemispheres are growing disproportionately faster than other sections of the brain. The embryo begins to make spontaneous and reflexive movements. Such movement is necessary to promote normal neuromuscular development. A touch to the mouth area causes the embryo to reflexively withdraw its head. The external ear is beginning to take shape. By 6 weeks, blood cell formation is underway in the liver, where lymphocytes are now present. This type of white blood cell is a key part of the developing immune system. The diaphragm, the primary muscle used in breathing, is largely formed by 6 weeks. A portion of the intestine now protrudes temporarily into the umbilical cord. This normal process, called physiologic herniation, makes room for other developing organs in the abdomen. At 6 weeks, the handplates develop a subtle flattening. Primitive brainwaves have been recorded as early as 6 weeks and 2 days. Nipples appear along the sides of the trunk, shortly before reaching their final location on the front of the chest. By 6.5 weeks, the elbows are distinct. The fingers are beginning to separate and hand movement can be seen. Bone formation.
Okay. Now, these images, as powerful as they are, and as necessary as they are not sufficient enough to convince enough people in America that abortion should be outlawed. They may be effective in changing the minds and hearts of an individual woman who might be considering an abortion. They've proven that's true. But that may not be enough for that same person to then think, not only is it wrong for me to have an abortion, but that it's wrong for you to have an abortion. And in fact, I think it's so wrong it should be against the law, and abortionists should be put in jail. And that's where we need to go. As powerful as these photos are, they're not sufficient enough to outlaw abortion. It's like saying, to understand the Holocaust, all you would need to do is watch or see a Jewish family at a bar mitzvah or something like that. That's not enough. To understand the Holocaust, you had to see the death camp photos. The same is true with abortion. It has to be seen to be understood. And what I'm going to do now is show a short clip, about 1 minute long, of abortion itself. And it's very difficult to watch, and I want to just warn the parents right now, or whoever, that this is your opportunity, if you choose to take a moment either to avert the gaze of your children, if you choose that it's not a good idea for them to look, or for you to take them out of the room. It's entirely up to you. Obviously, I want to give discretion to parents here. But if you choose to look, I ask you to do so. I ask you to look. Because it's something that we can't actually view it ourselves, then maybe we shouldn't be tolerating it. So let's go ahead and cue up that next video here. Give you time here, if necessary, to take care of that. All right? Go ahead, Craig. Okay. Well, now you have seen, like the priest and the Levite and the Samaritan who all saw the beating victim, now you've all seen. The question is, are you a good Samaritan or not? Are you someone who not only will just feel compassion, but you'll show compassion? Are you someone that will feel compassion and then take it upon themselves to actually minister to these preborn children by speaking up for them? And then having an ongoing commitment to defending them as long as you live. That's the order that's being called upon here. So, the one thing that is interesting here is that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., when the night before his assassination in Memphis, Tennessee, in his final speech, Dr. King reflected on the Good Samaritan passage. And I'd like to read that, because I think it's very appropriate for what we find ourselves facing here today in American abortion. And he said this. He talked about the Samaritan. He said, you know, the Samaritan got down from his beast and decided to not be compassionate by proxy. And what he meant there is that he didn't farm it out. He said, it's up to me. I'm not going to be compassionate by proxy, he said. But he got down with him. He administered first aid and helped the man in need. Jesus ended up saying, this was the good man. This was the great man. Because he had the capacity to project the I into the thou. And to be concerned about his brother. It's possible that those men were afraid. You see, the Jericho Road is a dangerous road, Dr. King said. It's winding, meandering. It's really conducive for ambushing. That's a dangerous road. In the days of Jesus, it came to be known as the Bloody Paths. It's possible that the priest and the Levite looked over at that man on the ground and wondered if the robbers were still around. I'm sure that happened. Or it's possible that they felt that the man on the ground was merely faking it. And he was acting like he had been robbed or hurt in order to seize them, lure them therein so they could take his goods. And so the first question the priest asked, the first question the Levite asked was this: if I stop to help this man, what will happen to me? That's what they asked. If I stop to help this man, what will happen to me? But the Samaritan came by and he reversed that question. And he said, if I don't stop to help this man, what will happen to him? See, fear says, if I stop, and if I change the way I live, if I behave differently, and I defend the preborn as a life pursuit, fear says, what's going to happen to me? I might lose friends. I'm going to be persecuted. People won't like me anymore. This kind of thing. That's all we've got to fear, but that is one of the fears. God says, if I don't get involved, what will happen to them? And so, there are a lot of good Samaritans in our country right now doing great work on the pro-life front. And what I'd like to do is just share with you a couple of things that we're doing at Created Equal in trying to pursue the ultimate cause, which is defending the preborn. One thing we do is we take a Jumbotron TV to the March for Life and other venues. And what I'd like to do here is I'm going to play a video of last year's march in which we captured, or attempted to capture, the facial expressions and the reactions of young people as they came by our TV screen. And I just want you to think about this and ask yourself this question. Are they good Samaritans? Go ahead and cue up the video and go ahead and play this. These are our young people. Brokenhearted. The appropriate response, right? Brokenheartedness. These are our young people who come to the March for Life every year. A lot of people say, well, Mark, why do you go there? You're preaching to the choir. People are there because they're pro-life. True. True. But are the victims of abortion represented at the march every year in that way? Isn't that why we march? We march for them. Shouldn't they be represented at their very own march? Shouldn't people know why we're going? We're marching for them, not for us. Somebody's got to show them. Somebody's got to represent them. That's been our role. And thank God our young people react that way. This is the type of attitude we need. They're our good Samaritans. They're the ones that are going to win this. They're the ones that are going to take us into the next generation, and we're going to win this thing. We're going to have victory with those types of young folks. And those are the people we're targeting at Created Equal. And some of the things we're doing is we're taking them on the road. We're teaching them with our programs. And our mission is this: to train the next generation of leaders, to educate high school and college-age students, to rescue babies from abortion, and to proclaim truth to our nation. Created Equal, if you distill it down, is a training program. Simple as that. We believe that students don't necessarily learn in the classroom, although that's important, and head knowledge is important, and pro-life apologetics being taught is important, but students learn on the job. And the best thing we can do is teach them in the classroom and take them out on the street and force them to defend what they just learned with people that don't agree with them. And there's lots of those out there waiting for them. And these kids love it. Our young people are looking for a cause to believe in. They are. And unfortunately, we're not providing it often enough. See, the pro-life movement is truly a movement, not simply a cause. And there's a difference. If you go to Facebook, there's 350,000 causes. I don't know if you knew that or not. It's unbelievable. 350,000 causes. There's even a cause to end Facebook causes. Yeah. In fact, true. This is true. There's a cause to end the cause to end Facebook causes. I'm serious. So there's all kinds of causes, and some of them are fine and good and right and just. But there's a difference between a cause and a movement. A movement is something that is ordained by God Almighty. Pro-life movement is a movement. The civil rights movement is a movement. It's something that people can believe in that's bigger than themselves. It's something that people come together and can coalesce around. That they're willing to lay down their lives for if necessary. That's a movement, not a cause. And that's our calling. Jesus said, "You love me if you lay down your lives for your friends." Our preborn friends need our lives laid down. Possibly physically, but at least sacrificially every day. Our young people are looking for a cause, are looking for a movement. We're trying to provide that with the Justice Rides, and I'd like to share that in a minute. In 2013, we equipped 974 students, that's the classroom part, in 17 pro-life apologetics trainings. These are about 3 hours long, by the way. And I'm going to make a pitch right now. If you have a young person in high school, or you have a young person that's in between the high school and college, wants to take a gap year or a semester, wants to take their spring break, come on the road with us. You'll be changed forever. You'll never be the same. We have internships where we bring in those folks who have been on the road with us for a week or two, and we say, you want a further commitment? Come and work for us. Make it daily. Make it a routine. Make it your job, at least for a year, or possibly less than that, or a semester. Internships. We educate by taking signs like this to universities all across this country. The training ground for our young people are on the college campuses right now. Not only do we reach out and try to save the lives of preborn children and spare parents from abortion on campus and change the culture, hopefully, it's the greatest training ground you could imagine. Because I'll tell you what, you'd be shocked. If you haven't been on a college campus lately, you would be amazed at what these kids think. And you're going to get a chance to watch some of it later. And we need to be there to tell the truth. Justice Rides. Now, you might say, well, what's a justice ride? Well, the pro-life movement doesn't live in a vacuum. There are historical precedents for what we do. And one of them, and one of the best, is the Civil Rights Movement. We can look back and glean from the Civil Rights Movement principles, immutable principles, that we can apply to the pro-life movement. The Civil Rights Movement was a true movement. That was a movement of God, as is the pro-life movement. What kept the Civil Rights Movement moving was people were willing to lay down their lives and sacrifice it for the cause. And so what we've done is we've taken this idea of the freedom rides and we've adapted it and we've called it the justice rides. Now it's a little bit different, but let me explain it. Who remembers or can recall the freedom rides from history or has lived long enough to be alive at the time? The freedom rides, very simple, basically. Buses were segregated in the South. So folks said, listen, we're not going to allow the status quo. That's not good enough. We're going to break the law. We're going to say to the government, we don't abide by your law. And what they did is they got on buses and they broke the law and they didn't abide by the segregation rules. And they started in Washington, D.C. and they meant to end in New Orleans. And what happened, unfortunately, is white racists would, at certain stops along the way, would accost the bus. Some of them got firebombed. People died. When the people came out of the buses, they were beaten with bats and chains and clubs. One such person was James Word, who you see behind me. James Word was a college kid, 21 years old, lived in Chicago, heard about the Freedom Rides. He had a roommate in college that was constantly discriminated against, and it made an impression on him. And he said, you know what? I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to go down and I'm going to be part of the Freedom Rides. What makes James Word different? He's white. He didn't have any case. Nothing for him personally. Right? What do you have to gain? Isn't that true of the pro-life movement? The ultimate sacrificial movement. We have nothing to gain by defending the preborn. James Word didn't either. And he went down and he was part of the Freedom Rides and he ended up in the hospital after he got beat up. Spent 3 days unconscious. And then he woke up and this video was captured. And you'll see what I mean. James Word is a good Samaritan.
Segregation must be stopped. It must be broken down. Those of us who are on the Freedom Ride, who will continue the Freedom Ride, I'm not sure that I'll be able to, but we're going on to New Orleans, no matter what happens. We're dedicated to this. We'll take hitting, we'll take beating. We're willing to accept death. But we're going to keep coming until we can ride from anywhere in the South to any place else in the South without anybody making any comments, just as American citizens.
James Word said what? He was willing to accept death. After being beaten that close to death, coming out of 3 days of being unconscious, said, listen, I'll lay it all down. We're looking for James Words. Now, we're not looking to martyr or get martyred. It's not about that. We don't face that kind of persecution in the pro-life movement. But we got to have people that are willing to sacrifice. And there are young people out there that are willing to do this and willing to come on the road with us and coalesce around this bigger cause, something bigger than themselves. Now, it's our justice rides. It's part of the education, the training, the program. This is what our students look like when we go on the road. This was this summer. We do it twice a year, a week at a time, in the summer and on spring break, and then throughout the year we're individually going out in teams of 2. Some people say, you know, Mark, do the graphic photos really work? Well, listen to this, or read this from an individual, this female student from Columbus State Community College, which is a college that we routinely go to in our own city. This person said this really does work. It's changed our campus. It totally changed my perspective. It's the ongoing daily or weekly presence on a campus that makes the difference. Now, let me play this video clip. This is a clip to basically promo, if you will, our upcoming Justice Ride. Go ahead and cue this up. This is several minutes long. Just testimonies of some of our Justice Riders and students that were on campus that were impacted by our presence.
I'm no longer pro-choice.
Everybody should see it. I seen these pictures, and then I went back home, spoke to my girlfriend, because we were going to contemplate if we were going to get rid of it or keep it. And I was like, no, we're not having an abortion. We're going to keep it.
And she said, I'm 8 weeks pregnant. I heard a heartbeat, everything. But this picture changed my mind. She said, after seeing the images, I couldn't imagine doing this to my own child.
To expect coming out here, but the friendships I've made being on the team has been really great. I mean, I've learned so much being able to be out here on the field and actually like talking with people instead of just sitting in the classroom listening to things that you could say.
The social ride has been amazing because we've had a really strong group of people from all over who are working together for the same goal of ending human abortion, and where we're from, we all unite for one single purpose. And it's been really awesome getting out to just confront a culture and confront the biggest social justice issue of our day.
I learned this week how your faith and how science go together and how you can defend both of them at the same time and use logic to defend your beliefs and to defend the unborn.
I even talked with one girl who was supposed to be aborted, and she told me, keep up the great work, you're doing an amazing thing, because here I am standing today, and if it wouldn't be for people like you, I might not even be here.
I would recommend it to all people.
Come on the next Justice Ride.
Make a significant difference.
The Justice Ride is such an amazing experience.
Just an absolute awesome opportunity. It's so much fun.
The best of my life.
Effective. Awesome. It's amazing. I mean, this is one of the greatest movements to protect and to preserve human life.
Join us.
We need to be strong in what we're talking about.
If you want to learn how to defend the preborn, come on the next Justice Ride. Millions of children that are being butchered every year, and we have the opportunity to do something to stop that and to stand up for them when they can't stand up for themselves.
All right, next Justice Ride is March 8th. And the way it works is everybody comes to Columbus, we hop in vans, for about 9 days we're on the road. And we train them on the road. So it's not just outreach and it's not just classroom. It's every night. We have prayer meetings, we have fellowship time, worship, we have movies that we play that have historical significance, and so forth. So when they get back, it's not just that they went out and reached a bunch of campuses, that they've been immersed in the idea of social justice as it applies to the preborn. 1 week. 1 week. So if you're interested, your young people are interested, let us know. We do this twice a year. And also we go to a civil rights museum or an institute, and we've been to the Birmingham Institute on civil rights, stuff like that along the way. So if you're interested, let us know. These are the campuses we've reached since just this fall. That's just our organization in Columbus. Jumbotron, I shared about this a little bit earlier. We've been using this now for about 2 years. And if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a video is worth 1,000,000 words. And a picture of a dismembered child will convince some, but a video might convince more. And the technology is such that it's becoming more available, if you will, and more affordable. So we're being able to do this more often. This summer, for the first time, we took it to a city. Let's go ahead and cue up this next video. This is a news report from Cincinnati, Ohio, when we took the Jumbotron out to Fountain Square.
graphic video on Fountain Square today, an anti-abortion organization spreading its message downtown.
And this video all comes less than a week after Ohio Governor John Kasich signed that new abortion restrictions, those restrictions into law.
WLWT News 5's John London has both sides of the issue.
Now, this sign was up on Fountain Square today, planted by pro-choice protesters who objected to a first-ever video display here on Fountain Square by opponents of abortion. Wearing identical colors, unloading posters and bottles of water, they could have been mistaken for teens on a field trip. But these youths from all over the country are mission-driven.
That's why we're out here today, is to let people know we don't hate people who've had abortions or participated in them.
That's Sarah Marr, engaging Jason Meenan, who told us he was pro-choice before coming by here. What he and others saw displayed today is the work of Created Equal, a Columbus-based group focused on influencing those sandwiched between the extremes of the volatile abortion issue. Sarah says she's been both spat upon and hugged for the very public effort she's engaged in.
Never go out there in anger. That's the key to things. When you talk to people, you don't do so in anger. You do so in a loving manner, because we all think we're on the compassionate side of things.
Some are repelled by the images, which we first showed you on WLWT.com, especially the video of actual abortions, shown on a large screen the group rented and trucked onto the square. Others are receptive to dialogue about it, which is progress as far as the organizers are concerned.
Changing hearts and minds, individual hearts and minds, because politics is downstream of culture.
Two women garbed in superhero costumes tried to position themselves so as to block some of the view.
There are families coming through here, people on their lunch break, children, and I don't think it's appropriate.
But Jason Meenan had already seen enough.
It changed my mind 100%. To the fact that I feel strongly against it.
Created Equal did this in Cleveland and Columbus earlier in the week, Cincinnati today, Pittsburgh tomorrow. On Fountain Square, John London, WLWT News.
Okay, well, if our opposition is characterized by people who dress up in superheroes costumes, I don't think we have much of a problem about winning this thing. But anyway, that's a way of trying to mock what we're doing. It's just another tactic. But so the jumbotrons we're beginning to use more often around the country, and we'll continue to ramp that up in 2014. Rescuing. Oh, by the way, let me back up. Two of the people pictured in that video alone, just this week, displayed our images on their own campuses. That's the goal. Transferability, duplication, right? Versatility. Often what the problem is for pro-life women, we're doing all the work. We can't do that. I don't know about you, I'm not getting any younger. And none of us are. If we don't transfer the projects and the methods and the tactics that we know work to a younger generation, then we got some problems. And so, just this week, as I said, Sarah was one who's using these signs. And then on Purdue University, Jonathan, who was in that video, is using the signs on his campus. So, we get them, we give them the signs, they go out on their own campuses, and they start displaying it on their own. And we continue to mentor them over time. Rescuing. How many people are aware of what's happening in Albuquerque, New Mexico? Raise your hand. Okay, interesting. All right, well, let me explain, give you a little background here on what's happening on the political end of things. And I think most of us would agree that the federal government is dysfunctional. Have you noticed? I mean, I hope you got the memo lately. It's a little bit dysfunctional in Washington right now. And over the last, generation or so, it's very difficult to see that there's going to be a lot of progress on the abortion issue when it comes to the federal government. It comes to the Supreme Court, U.S. Congress, pro-life, pro-choice president. It seems to not matter. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't try to elect a pro-life president. It doesn't mean that we don't try to elect a pro-life president who can nominate justices to the Supreme Court that might reverse Roe versus Wade. We don't give up on that, don't get me wrong. But if you put all your eggs in that basket, I got news for you. It isn't happening right now. So what's happened most recently is, politically speaking, we've turned to the state legislatures. All across America. Last year, in 2011, 47 of the 50 states, this is great news, 47 of the 50 states passed laws on abortion, to restrict abortion. 47 out of 50. 92 pieces of legislation were signed into law. That's double the amount in 2010. And up until that point, you put 2010 and 11, that equals as much as many laws that have been passed since Roe versus Wade in our state legislatures. So on the local level, on the state level, we're having an impact. We're having an impact. In my state, you heard, our governor signed just about a month ago 5 measures, and since then 3 abortion clinics have been closed in our state. That's happening all across America. It's happening all across America. Texas, I think you can read it, 12 in Texas, because the governor who knew to do the right thing in the legislature that says, listen, we're not going to wait for the federal government to do the right thing on this. We're going to do it ourselves. Well, if that's true, 3 in Maryland, for example. So this is all across America. In fact, I think the Operation Rescue said 47 have closed since the beginning of the year. That's because of state legislatures who have said to the federal government, listen, we can't wait around for you. It's not happening. We're going to do it ourselves. Amen. The truth also is that cities, for the first time, Albuquerque, I think, being the most recent example, is saying, listen, if the state legislature can do it, why can't a city? Okay? So, why Albuquerque, though? You might think, well, Mark, that's a long way from Ohio. It is. Why Albuquerque? Well, Albuquerque is probably in New Mexico, of course, and New Mexico has almost no restrictions on abortion. Therefore, abortionists, late-term abortionists in particular, flocked to New Mexico to set up shop. And Albuquerque has become the nation's capital, if you will, the largest late-term abortion center in America. So the citizens of Albuquerque, the pro-life citizens, said, listen, we're going to put up a ballot measure, a citizen's petition. We need 12,000 signatures to get it on the ballot to end 20-week abortions, the pain-capable abortion ban in their own city. They got 27,000 signatures in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. 3 weeks. The city of Albuquerque on Tuesday will vote to ban 20-week abortions for the first time since Roe versus Wade. It's the first time the city has done this. That's important. It's significant. It's historic. Here's why. Not only, hopefully, if it passes, and if it doesn't pass this time, we'll get it coming next time. But hopefully, it'll end 20-week abortions and above in Albuquerque. That's a good thing, which will virtually shut down that abortion for good. But more importantly, it'll send shockwaves throughout the abortion industry to say, listen, your city's next. That's right. Yes. Places like Germantown, who have late-term abortion clinics, they're next. Other places around the country that have late-term facilities, they're next. That's the precedent it's setting. So be praying for Albuquerque on Tuesday. I leave from here and I go to Albuquerque to help to push this thing across the finish line. Be in prayer for that. Now, as part of our efforts in Albuquerque, along with a lot of other organizations like Operation Rescue, Live Action, Students for Life of America, Project Defending Life, and so on, lots of organizations, Susan Anthony's list down there, Susan B. Anthony's list, lots of organizations have coalesced and come into Albuquerque to get this done. Our part, well, you know our part, show the truth. So what we did is we helped out with Operation Rescue and put a truth truck on the ground. We also worked with the students at the University of New Mexico to display our images and do outreach, and they're doing it throughout this week, by the way, with the help of the survivors of the abortion Holocaust out of California. And thirdly, we passed out flyers in neighborhoods of abortionists who live in the areas of Albuquerque, which juxtaposes their pictures next to abortion images. To let the people know in these areas, this is what they do in your community. So, what I'd like to do, this is a group that we trained this summer, to go out on the road, and they're out there right now on the streets of Albuquerque. I'd like to play a video clip. This is of Albuquerque television news regarding our truth truck.
It's graphic, and it's out there for everyone to see. It's a truck that doubles as an anti-abortion billboard, and it's hitting the early voting sites around the city. And much like the abortion question on the ballot, the billboard elicits some strong opinions. News 13's Tina Jensen is live in the North Valley. Tina?
Jessica, this is the trunk that everyone's talking about. It's so graphic, we can't show you all of it on TV, and the group sponsoring the trunk say that's the point.
It's a trunk that will be roaming the streets of Albuquerque for the next 2 weeks, sponsored by several anti-abortion groups.
When people look at the brutal violent act depicted on the truck, they have to say, you know what, am I for protecting these children or am I against that?
Today's unveiling of the truck sparked protests.
It's propaganda and it's staged. It's not every pregnancy. It differs. It's a shock entertainment, shock and awe, and I don't agree with it.
Others call it a reality check.
I think it's necessary to get the information out to people that this is really what's happening to children. Do people really know that babies are being torn apart?
The anti-abortion groups know the images are graphic and shocking and say that's exactly the point.
Right, you get the idea. Now, they censored the photos, which is the very reason why we need to do what we do. If the media won't show it, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. And even when they censor the images, they have to explain why they're doing it, don't they? They say they're too graphic to show on television. Well, why is that? That's not because they're really too graphic. It's because they don't want to answer the phone from the thousands of people that will be upset because they have been complicit in abortion. That's the reason, really. Because America's complicit. We're part of it. That's why they don't want to show the photos. It's not just simply because it's graphic. That's not really the reason. All right, so Albuquerque, be in prayer for that. I think that's historic. The other thing we do, and others, is to proclaim the truth. There is a prophetic role for the pro-life movement to speak truth to power on this issue. Whether it be in the federal government, state legislature, we need to hold our elected officials accountable for their positions on life. Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. Somebody's got to do it. And recently, last year, we went to the inauguration of President Obama. Now, we would go to the inauguration of a Republican president, too, to be honest with you. It's not about him. It's not about President Obama. It's about life. And it's about the thousands and hundreds of thousands of people that come out for the inauguration who need to be educated about, in this case, what this president supports. And so we went out and we shared the truth about this to the president. This, by the way, was a divine appointment in Troy, Ohio last fall before the election. You don't get much closer to President Obama's motorcade than that.
Do solemnly swear. I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear. I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States. The office of President of the United States. And will, to the best of my ability. Will, to the best of my ability. Preserve, protect, and defend. Preserve, protect, and defend. The Constitution of the United States. The Constitution of the United States. So help you God. So help me God. Congratulations, Mr. President.
What makes us exceptional, what makes us American, is our allegiance to an idea articulated in a declaration made more than 2 centuries ago. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. That they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We, the people, declare today that the most evident of truths that all of us are created equal, is the star that guides us still.
Not the state, women will decide our fate. Not the church, not the state, women will decide our fate. Not the church.
Finally, I'd like to take the last couple of minutes to just give you a couple of things to put in your toolkit to help you to become a better defender of the preborn. A better defender of the preborn. We have a brochure. Jack, could you grab one of my Ziploc bags there? I'd like to show the brochure that we hand out on campus. We're all created equal. This isn't a difficult issue to explain to people. It's black and white, really. Now, the complications, the situations that parents find themselves in a crisis pregnancy, they can be complicated, and they're difficult, no question. But whether the preborn are human or not, that's not a difficult question. That's black and white. We've proven that. Science is on our side. But we have this booklet, this small brochure, that basically takes the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in his I Have a Dream speech and juxtaposes next to pictures of abortion and makes the case, the simple case, that abortion is ageism. Ageism. Now, I know that's an old-fashioned word. We're bringing it back. Abortion is simply age-based discrimination. It's age-based discrimination. What I'd like to do is hopefully this clip will play. If not, we'll do that. But this is a clip of students we took from various campuses that we visited, and some of the common arguments we get from abortion advocates. And I put them into one short video to give you an idea of what we encounter on college campuses. Hopefully the video will play out.
Like, this all comes down to terminology and rigmarole and rhetoric anyway. Terminology and rigmarole and rhetoric. Well, it's not a person quite yet like you and I. There's an instart process.
Rape babies. If you were raped and had to have a baby, that's kind of messed up that you can't abort it because one, it's not yours. Two, that wasn't your choice.
And plus, what the cost of what it takes to raise the kid is significant. It takes at least $100,000 if not more, especially if they go to college.
Sacrifice my life for my family. Women die having kids.
It's a part of the body because if the woman dies, then so does that fetus.
But you would be okay with killing your baby?
Yes, I will.
Why?
Because I didn't want the kids. You know, I didn't want the kids.
Fetuses, you're not self-aware until you have a certain amount of brain activity, and they don't.
They don't exactly have the same characteristics as a normal. I mean, they are alive, yes, but like a normal, everyday person who's capable of breathing on their own.
This is like you kill a baby fetus, the same thing as killing any old inanimate object.
I can't answer that question. You have to ask, because you have a scientist that'll say a fetus is human. You have a scientist that'll say a fetus isn't human.
Would it be okay to kill 2-month-old person yet? I mean, I don't want to be the person to make that decision, but I wouldn't make a big fuss about it.
It's not an independence life. No, it's for the biological term for the parasitic relationship. There's symbiotic relationships where both of them are kind of dependent on one another for survival, and there's a parasitic relationship where that fetus it needs that woman to survive.
If you don't like abortion, don't have one.
The only thing that can be said to be objective truth is that there is no objective truth.
But early in the trimester, when the baby is partially developed and really ain't developed and really don't have nothing,
well, that's one
kill it. I mean, I had a miscarriage before. Their baby is big in the beginning. I guarantee you. It drops out, you know.
Does size matter?
Yeah, I mean, no size doesn't matter. Development matters.
Well, I'm personally pro-life, except in certain instances.
I see.
But I view it from a medical standpoint rather than any religious one. Or I would argue that we certainly are not all created equal. I mean, IQ test, EQ test will all tell you that. We are not created equal. In fact, I think you should have a license to breed.
He said license to breed, by the way. Yeah, sorry for the video there, but you get the idea of what we're up against on college campuses across America. These students have been lied to. They're just basically regurgitating what they've been told throughout their lives. And it's our job to try to correct that. Now, this booklet basically lays out the case that abortion is simply age-based discrimination. Now, what I did here is I basically took every argument that you heard from those students, and this is not exhaustive, by the way, for all the arguments that people give to support abortion, but I took the arguments from that video clip and I put them in a list here. This is what we often hear over and over again on campus. We hear that the baby is not self-aware. That's called sentience, by the way. They're not developed enough to be self-aware. We hear that abortion should be permitted in the case of rape or incest, that they cost too much, babies are too expensive, therefore we should be able to abort them. If the life of the mother is threatened, we should be able to abort them. What about the woman's body? That question is often brought up. How about unwanted children? Question of when life begins. They say science disagrees. Well, that's actually not true at this point. And just about the idea of reproductive choice itself. We have choice in America. And then finally, a parasitic relationship, people say. It's dependent on the mother. These are the kind of arguments we get. Now, what I'd like to do is just share with you an acronym. Now, this isn't original to me, and many of you have probably already understood this. How many people have heard of the SLED test? Raise your hand. SLED test. Okay, good. You haven't. Well, actually, it would be good if you have. But now that you've been exposed to it, it would be a good thing. This acronym SLED was originally came up with by a guy named Michael Schwartz, who wrote a book called The Moral Question of Abortion. And basically what he did is he said that every argument for abortion will generally fall within one of these four categories. Okay? The first category is size. The argument is this: the preborn are smaller than newborns. True, right? True. But the point of the matter is, why does that matter? Do we place more value on larger people than we do smaller people? See, the question is value. Where do we get our value? Is our value intrinsically given to us by God or not? At fertilization. Level of development is the second one. And you hear this, that the preborn are not as developed as the newborns. This is true again. But again, why do we value children that are more developed than children that aren't? Do we? We shouldn't. And that's simply a function of what? Their age. That's all it is. They are less, their development is not as much as a born child simply because they're younger. That's it. They're younger. Environment. Well, the preborn reside in the mother's womb. This is true. But again, why is that? They're younger. Where else do we expect them to be? Dependency. The preborn are dependent upon their mothers to live. Again, true, but this is a function of age. And I would submit to you that born children are dependent on their mothers to live. I've got a 21-year-old college student that's dependent on his parents to live right now. So you understand that dependency doesn't end at birth, necessarily. So the argument here is that abortion is age-based discrimination. Remember that. Remember the SLED acronym. And when you're talking to abortion advocates, think to yourself, which one of these does it fall within? Are they talking about development? Well, if they're talking about development, simply compare the preborn to the born. The preborn to the born. When someone says, should abortion be acceptable in the case of a rape or incest? How do you answer that? Well, here's how you answer. Let's just say theoretically, okay, that a woman had consensual sex with her husband. And 2 days later, she's raped. She gets pregnant. She doesn't know. She doesn't know who the father is. But erring on the side of love, life, they choose to see the pregnancy through the term. And after the baby's born, they do a test to find out. And they find out that it's the rapist that's the husband. And then you ask the person, would it be okay to kill that child now? And guess what they'll say? No. I haven't had one person say that it's acceptable at that point to kill that baby. And the question is, then, why not? Why not? And they'll say, well, because that baby's born. And I'll say, well, why does that matter? Why does that matter? Say, it's all about age. It's simply age. On this list, what about unwanted children? Do we kill unwanted children who are born to deal with those issues? No. Would we ever do that? Generally not. So, just remember that. If you want to find out more about our training programs, every one of our apologetic seminars are on our website. You can watch them for yourselves. The SLED test is developed and actually in more depth, so you can actually hear it and watch it for yourselves in the comfort of your own living room or family room, your own computer. Go to our website at creatingequal.net. All right, let's see. Let's end it there. Now Jack would like to come up and say a few words, and I will take questions after he comes up and share a few words. If you have any questions about Creating Equal, please feel free to ask me. If you have questions about abortion generally, the better arguments, let me know if you have any questions about that. We'll try to handle those as well, and I will be here afterwards also.